Sometimes the biggest misunderstanding becomes the doorway to the greatest miracle. People would later whisper, but on that unforgettable autumn evening, no one inside the Grand Regent Hotel believed anything good could possibly come from the moment that changed Ethan Brooks' life forever. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers as the annual Kensington Foundation Gala prepared to welcome America's most influential business leaders, governors, philanthropists, and entrepreneurs. Every polished marble floor reflected the warm glow of golden lights. Every fresh bouquet carried the subtle scent of white roses, and every conversation floated through the air with the quiet confidence that only wealth could buy. Hidden far behind the elegant celebration, Ethan tightened the strap of his worn tool bag and followed a maintenance supervisor through a maze of service hallways. At 41 years old, he had learned that no job was beneath a man trying to keep a promise to his child. Since losing his wife 6 years earlier, every overtime shift, every emergency repair, and every sleepless night had one purpose waiting at home in the form of 8-year-old Lily Brooks. Her asthma medication wasn't cheap, and neither were the dreams she still carried with innocent certainty. "Daddy," she had whispered before school that morning, "don't work too hard today." Ethan had smiled, kissed her forehead, and replied with the same quiet confidence he always offered. "I'll always make a home." He never imagined how difficult that promise would become. Deep inside the hotel's restricted executive wing, an unexpected power fluctuation swept through several private suites reserved for VIP guests. Security radios crackled. Backup generators hesitated. Emergency lights blinked once, then twice, painting the hallway in alternating shadows and soft amber light. "Room 2708, the supervisor called. "Electrical panel. Hurry before the gala starts." Ethan nodded without complaint. He climbed 2 flights of service stairs because the elevators had temporarily shut down, reached the executive corridor, and found every door looking nearly identical beneath the dim emergency lighting. One room stood slightly open. Believing it belonged to the maintenance request, he knocked twice. "Maintenance," he called calmly. Receiving no answer over the distant sound of music and hurried footsteps, he eased the door, open only a few inches. At that exact second, another surge restored full power to the suite. Brilliant lights flooded the room. Standing several yards away near an elegant dressing screen, Claire Kensington had been changing from a business suit into an evening gown before the gala. Startled by the sudden light and the unexpected voice at the doorway, she instinctively reached for the silk robe hanging beside her and wrapped it securely around herself in one smooth motion. Their eyes met for only an instant. Ethan's face drained of color. Realizing immediately that he had entered the wrong room entirely, he lowered his eyes, stepped backward, and spoke with genuine embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Wrong suite." Before he could close the door completely, frantic voices echoed from the hallway. Security officers rushed toward the room while a hotel manager pointed directly at Ethan. Claire stood frozen, still catching her breath, unable to process what had just happened. To everyone watching, it appeared to be an unforgivable intrusion. To Ethan, it was simply the worst mistake of his life. And neither of them knew that this single accident had already begun rewriting both of their futures. The hallway fell into an uneasy silence that somehow felt louder than the orchestra playing inside the ballroom. One security officer stepped in front of Ethan, while another quietly closed the suite door behind him. The hotel manager arrived moments later, breathing hard, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. "Sir, I need you to hand me your identification badge," he said firmly. Ethan did not argue. He unclipped the temporary contractor badge from his shirt and placed it into the manager's hand. "I entered the wrong room," he said calmly. "The hallway lights were out. I believed it was the maintenance request." One of the guards folded his arms. "That room belongs to Miss Claire Kensington." Ethan nodded once. "I understand. I made a mistake, and I am truly sorry." There was no anger in his voice, only quiet regret. Inside the suite, Claire remained standing near the dressing area, her heartbeat slowly settling as her assistant hurried over with her evening gown. The image of the electrician immediately lowering his eyes instead of staring lingered in her thoughts longer than she expected. Still, embarrassment quickly became frustration. She had spent years protecting her privacy in a world where cameras followed every public appearance. She could not afford even the appearance of carelessness. "Make sure he never works another event for this company," she said quietly to her chief of security. "I do not want this repeated." The instruction was delivered without raising her voice, yet everyone in the room understood it carried the full weight of a billionaire chief executive officer. 20 minutes later, Ethan signed the incident report in the maintenance office. His supervisor avoided eye contact. "I know you did not mean for this to happen," the older man admitted, "but Kensington Dynamics owns nearly half our commercial contracts. They have already requested someone else. I have no choice." Ethan gave a faint smile that carried more grace than disappointment. "You do what you have to do." He packed his tools carefully, making sure every wrench returned to its proper place before lifting the heavy bag onto his shoulder. Outside, the October air felt colder than it had that afternoon. He climbed into his aging Ford F-150 pickup and sat quietly without starting the engine. His phone buzzed. A reminder appeared across the screen. Lily's prescription refill. Due tomorrow. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment before turning the key. Across town, the gala unfolded exactly as planned. Cameras flashed. Crystal glasses chimed. Powerful people applauded Claire as she stepped onto the stage to announce another multi-million-dollar charitable initiative. She smiled with practiced confidence, yet something refused to leave her mind. Every time applause filled the ballroom, she remembered the electrician's face when he had realized his mistake. There had been no panic, no excuses, no disrespect, only immediate apology. Late that evening, after the final guests departed, Claire walked alone through the quiet hotel corridor toward the executive exit. She noticed an engineering clipboard resting on a service card. Attached to it was a handwritten maintenance report signed by Ethan Brooks. Beneath his signature, someone had scribbled a note in blue ink. "Excellent technician. Honest man. Always volunteers for emergency calls." Claire stopped walking. She read the sentence twice before slowly looking back toward the now empty hallway. For the first time since the incident, certainty gave way to doubt, and somewhere beneath the polished confidence that had built her empire, a small question began whispering louder than pride. Had she judged a good man too quickly? Early the next morning, long before the city settled into its familiar rhythm, Claire Kensington arrived at headquarters carrying something far heavier than the leather portfolio in her hand. During board meetings, she trusted numbers. During negotiations, she trusted evidence. Yet neither could explain the quiet feeling that had followed her home from the hotel. She entered her private office overlooking downtown Chicago just as the first rays of sunlight reflected across the glass towers. Her executive assistant placed a folder on the desk. "This is the background information you requested on Ethan Brooks." Claire looked at the file with mild surprise. "I do not remember asking for it." The assistant smiled politely. "You asked your security director last night before leaving the gala." Claire exhaled softly. She had almost forgotten. She opened the folder expecting to find complaints, disciplinary reports, or a history that justified her decision. Instead, she found something entirely different. Ethan Brooks, age 41, licensed master electrician, former senior electrical systems engineer, widower, sole guardian of his daughter, Lily Brooks, age 8, volunteer with the local community housing program, recipient of 3 neighborhood service awards, 0 customer complaints in 17 years. Claire turned another page. There were handwritten letters from elderly homeowners, thanking him for refusing payment after repairing broken wiring during winter storms. One letter simply read, "He restored our lights on Christmas Eve and quietly left before we could even bake him cookies." Another described how he repaired a disabled veteran's furnace without charging a single dollar. Claire rested her fingertips on the papers. They felt strangely personal, as though every page challenged the certainty she had carried only hours before. "Find out where he lives," she said quietly. Her assistant hesitated. "For legal reasons?" Claire slowly shook her head. No, I simply want to understand who he really is. Across town, Ethan's modest house stood at the end of a quiet street lined with aging maple trees already dressed in brilliant shades of red and gold. The white paint on the porch had begun to fade, and the wooden fence leaned slightly after years of Midwest winters, but laughter still lived inside those walls. Ethan stood in the small kitchen flipping blueberry pancakes, while Lily sat at the table, finishing a drawing for school. "Do you think I made too many?" he asked with an easy smile. Lily giggled. "You always make too many. That is because hope should always come with extra pancakes." She laughed again, and for a brief moment the worries of unpaid bills disappeared beneath the warmth of an ordinary breakfast. After walking Lily to the neighborhood bus stop, Ethan checked his voicemail. 3 companies had canceled upcoming maintenance jobs connected to Kensington Dynamics properties. He quietly slipped the phone back into his pocket. There was no complaint, no frustration, only the silent calculation every single parent understood. How many weeks could he stretch the savings? That afternoon, Claire's driver slowed the company sedan near Ethan's neighborhood while she remained seated in the back, unseen behind lightly tinted windows. She watched as Ethan helped an elderly neighbor carry grocery bags up a short flight of porch steps before kneeling to tighten a loose handrail without being asked and without accepting the folded $20 bill the grateful woman tried to press into his hand. He simply smiled, waved goodbye, and continued walking home beneath the golden autumn leaves. Claire did not speak for several moments. Finally, she whispered almost to herself, "That is not the man I believed I met." At that very moment, neither of them realized fate was already arranging a second encounter, one that neither wealth nor regret could prevent. 3 days passed with the quiet patience that often hides life-changing moments. Ethan accepted smaller repair jobs wherever he could find them, replacing worn outlets in old homes, repairing garage wiring, and climbing ladders beneath gray October skies while autumn leaves drifted across quiet suburban streets. Every evening he returned home before sunset, helping Lily with her homework before cooking simple dinners that somehow always tasted richer because they were shared together. Meanwhile, Claire found herself distracted during meetings in a way that had never happened before. Financial reports blurred into the background. Market forecasts suddenly felt less urgent than a single unanswered question. Had she mistaken dignity for deception? Late one Thursday afternoon, the answer arrived unexpectedly. A severe electrical failure shut down the main power system inside Claire's historic lakeside estate, just hours before she was scheduled to host an intimate charity dinner for several hospital directors and Children's Foundation donors. Backup circuits failed one after another. Decorative lighting disappeared. The heating system shut itself down. 3 separate electrical contractors inspected the control room before quietly admitting they could not locate the hidden fault without tearing apart entire sections of the house. Claire listened patiently before asking one simple question. Who originally designed the restoration work on this property? Her estate manager checked the archived maintenance records stored on a tablet. His eyebrows slowly lifted. 5 years ago, before your purchase, the emergency electrical restoration was completed by a contractor named Ethan Brooks. Claire remained silent. Fate, it seemed, possessed a sense of timing beyond even her understanding. "Call him," she said softly. The manager hesitated. "After what? Happened at the hotel? I doubt he would accept." Claire looked toward the rain beginning to fall beyond the tall windows. "Please ask anyway." Less than an hour later, Ethan parked his aging pickup beside the long curved driveway leading toward the estate. He almost declined the assignment after hearing the address, but the payment would cover Lily's medication for nearly a month. More importantly, electricity was not a luxury on a cold Illinois evening. It was a necessity. Carrying his weathered toolbox, he walked through the front entrance where polished hardwood floors reflected the warm glow of emergency lanterns placed throughout the house. Claire waited in the foyer wearing a simple navy sweater instead of a business suit. There were no photographers, no executives, and no security officers standing between them. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Ethan broke the silence first. "Good afternoon, Miss Kensington." His voice carried neither resentment nor bitterness, only professionalism. Claire lowered her eyes for a moment before meeting his calm expression. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Brooks." Another quiet pause settled between them, gentler than the first time they had met. "I understand if you would rather not be here," she continued. Ethan offered a faint smile that reached only the corners of his tired eyes. Electricity does not care about misunderstandings. If something needs fixing, I fix it. Claire found herself unexpectedly smiling back. It was small, almost hesitant, yet completely genuine. As Ethan followed the estate manager toward the basement mechanical room, Claire watched him disappear around the hallway corner. For the first time in many years, the most valuable thing inside her home was not hidden in the artwork, the antiques, or the investment portfolio. It was the quiet presence of a man whose character seemed to shine brightest whenever no one was watching. The steady hum of restored electricity echoed softly through the basement as Ethan tightened the final connection inside the aging control panel. One by one, lights returned throughout the estate. The heating system awakened with a gentle rush of warm air, and somewhere upstairs a grandfather clock resumed its familiar ticking as though the house itself had taken a deep breath after holding it for hours. Ethan closed the panel carefully, wiped his hands with an old shop towel, and packed every tool exactly where it belonged. "Everything should be stable now," he explained to the estate manager. "One damaged relay caused the overload, but I also replaced 2 worn connections that would have failed before winter." The manager stared at the neatly repaired system. The other contractors wanted to replace the entire panel. Ethan smiled modestly. Sometimes people replace what only needs understanding. Claire had arrived quietly at the doorway, just in time to hear those words. She remained there without interrupting, watching the man she had once dismissed finish his work with the same quiet precision he seemed to bring into every part of life. There was no performance, no attempt to impress anyone, only careful craftsmanship and quiet responsibility. As Ethan prepared to leave, Claire stopped him gently. "Would you stay for dinner?" she asked. "Our guests canceled after the power outage, and the kitchen has already prepared more food than anyone here could possibly eat." Ethan hesitated for only a moment. "Thank you, but my daughter is waiting for me at home." Claire nodded with understanding instead of disappointment. "Then allow me to send dinner with you." Ethan shook his head politely. "That is kind, but Lily and I already have a tradition." Claire tilted her head with quiet curiosity. "Every Thursday we make grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup," he said with a small smile. "She says they taste better because we cook them together." The answer lingered in the room long after the words ended. Claire had attended state dinners, private banquets, and exclusive charity galas where every table glittered with crystal and silver. Yet somehow a simple meal in a modest kitchen suddenly felt richer than all of them combined. Ethan accepted only the agreed payment, refusing the additional bonus the estate manager quietly offered. "You solve an emergency that could have cost us far more," the manager insisted. Ethan gently slid the envelope back across the desk. "Charge only for the work that was needed." "That is enough." Claire watched without saying a word. Money had solved nearly every problem she had ever encountered. Yet here stood a man who measured success by something entirely different. On the drive home, she found herself unable to stop thinking about him. Later that evening, curiosity overcame hesitation. She instructed her driver to take a different route through Ethan's neighborhood. From inside the quiet sedan, she saw warm light spilling through the front window of his small house. The curtains remained partially open. Ethan and Lily stood side by side in the tiny kitchen, wearing matching aprons that looked several years old. They laughed as tomato soup nearly boiled over, and Ethan exaggerated surprise until Lily burst into uncontrollable giggles. After dinner, he helped her wash the dishes before the two of them settled on the worn front porch to watch the autumn stars appear above the neighborhood. No expensive vacations, no luxury cars, no mansion overlooking the lake. Just a father fully present with the little girl who trusted him more than anyone else in the world. Claire quietly looked away as unexpected tears gathered in her eyes. For years, she had built an empire worth billions of dollars. but sitting alone behind the tinted window of her luxury sedan, she suddenly realized that the peaceful life unfolding inside that modest home possessed a kind of wealth she had never learned how to earn. The following Monday began with clear skies over Chicago, but inside the headquarters of Kensington Dynamics, storm clouds were gathering in ways no weather forecast could predict. Claire stepped into the executive conference room, expecting another ordinary strategy meeting. Instead, she found several board members studying their tablets with unusually tense expressions. One of them quietly slid a screen across the polished table toward her. A short security clip from the hotel gala had begun spreading through private industry circles. Someone had carefully trimmed the footage so that it started only when Ethan accidentally opened the suite door and ended before he immediately stepped back and apologized. Without context, the recording suggested something entirely different from what had actually happened. One director cleared his throat. "If this reaches the media, investors may question security at our events." Another added, "The contractor should issue a public apology. That would close the matter quickly." Claire watched the silent video once, then a second time. She remembered every detail the edited clip deliberately omitted. The knock on the door, the emergency lighting, his eyes lowering instantly, his apology before anyone had demanded one. She placed the tablet face down on the table. "This video does not show the truth," she said calmly. The room became still. "Who released it?" she asked. The chief legal officer answered quietly. "We cannot confirm, but it appears to have originated from a consulting firm currently competing for one of our infrastructure contracts." Claire understood immediately. Someone was attempting to damage both her reputation and an innocent man's character at the same time. Across town, Ethan knew nothing about the growing controversy. He spent the afternoon repairing electrical wiring inside a neighborhood community center where volunteers prepared meals for senior citizens. He finished the final inspection, accepted only the agreed payment, and stayed another 30 minutes helping stack folding tables before driving home to pick up Lily from school. As they walked together through a nearby park, Lily noticed her father unusually quiet. She slipped her small hand into his. "Did you have a hard day?" she asked. Ethan smiled gently. "Some days are heavier than others." She looked up with the simple wisdom only children sometimes possess. "Mom used to say heavy days do not last forever." Ethan felt his throat tighten. She was right. Back at headquarters, pressure continued building. Public relations advisors recommended releasing a carefully worded statement distancing the company from the contractor involved in the incident. Several executives insisted that protecting the corporation mattered more than defending someone outside the organization. Claire listened without interrupting until every opinion had been heard. Finally, she stood and walked toward the wide windows overlooking the city. The afternoon sun reflected across countless buildings, each one built by people whose names history rarely remembered. She thought of Ethan repairing homes during winter, refusing extra money, cooking grilled cheese sandwiches with Lily, and quietly carrying burdens no one else could see. Then she turned back toward the board. "Character is not measured by how we protect ourselves," she said with steady conviction. "It is measured by how we protect the truth, especially when the truth benefits someone who has nothing to offer us in return." No one answered. The silence filling the conference room was different from disagreement. It was the silence that arrives when pride unexpectedly meets integrity. And before the meeting ended, Claire made a decision that would place her own reputation on the line, because for the first time in many years, doing what was right mattered more to her than simply doing what was safe. The announcement came the very next morning. Reporters, investors, and employees gathered inside the spacious media hall at Kensington Dynamics, expecting another corporate statement carefully crafted by attorneys and public relations experts. Instead, Claire Kensington walked onto the stage, carrying only a slim folder and a quiet expression that revealed neither fear nor hesitation. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as she approached the podium. The room settled into complete silence. She looked directly into the audience before speaking. Several days ago, an edited security recording began circulating without context. Today, I am here to provide that missing truth. A large screen illuminated behind her. The complete security footage began playing from the very beginning. It showed the temporary power failure. It showed the emergency lights flickering. It showed Ethan knocking respectfully before opening what he believed was the maintenance room. Most importantly, it showed him immediately lowering his eyes, stepping backward, apologizing sincerely, and attempting to leave before security even reached the hallway. When the recording ended, the silence inside the room lasted several long seconds. Claire folded her hands together. Mr. Ethan Brooks conducted himself with professionalism and respect from the first second until the last. The misunderstanding was exactly that, a misunderstanding. Any suggestion otherwise is false, and I regret that my own first reaction contributed to placing an honorable man under unnecessary suspicion. Questions immediately erupted from reporters, but Claire answered each one calmly. She accepted responsibility without blaming anyone else. She defended Ethan's character without exaggeration. By the end of the conference, the story had completely changed. News headlines no longer questioned the electrician. Instead, they praised a chief executive officer willing to publicly acknowledge her mistake. Across the city, Ethan knew nothing about the press conference until his phone began vibrating repeatedly while he replaced outdoor lighting at a neighborhood church. His supervisor called first, then former customers, then friends he had not spoken with in years. Finally, the pastor stepped outside holding a tablet. "Ethan," he said with a warm smile, "I think you should see this." Ethan watched the recording quietly from beginning to end. He listened to Claire's statement without interrupting. When it finished, he simply slipped the phone back into his pocket and returned to tightening the final light fixture. The pastor looked surprised. "That is all you have to say?" Ethan smiled gently. "She told the truth. That is enough." Word of his response spread almost as quickly as the original misunderstanding. People expected interviews, emotional speeches, perhaps even anger. Instead, they found only quiet grace. That evening, Claire stood outside Ethan's modest home carrying a small basket filled with homemade blueberry muffins prepared by her personal chef after she learned they were Lily's favorite. She hesitated before walking to the front porch. When Ethan opened the door, Lily peeked curiously from behind him. Claire offered the basket with both hands. "I thought your Thursday tradition deserved dessert," she said softly. Lily looked at her father with hopeful eyes. Ethan smiled before stepping aside. "Would you like to come in for a few minutes?" Claire nodded, feeling unexpectedly nervous. Inside the little kitchen, surrounded by faded cabinets, family photographs, and the comforting aroma of fresh soup warming on the stove, the richest woman in the room quietly discovered that forgiveness often opens doors far more valuable than wealth ever could. The little house felt warmer than its size could explain. The scent of tomato soup still lingered in the kitchen while Lily carefully arranged the blueberry muffins on a small ceramic plate that had a tiny chip along the edge. Claire sat at the worn wooden table, surrounded by faded family photographs that captured birthdays, school plays, and camping trips instead of luxury vacations. She realized that every frame on the wall told the story of a father who had chosen presents over possessions. Lily pushed a mug of hot chocolate toward her with a bright smile. "Daddy says hot chocolate makes hard days softer." Claire accepted it with quiet gratitude. "Your daddy sounds very wise." Lily giggled. "He says he is still learning." Ethan laughed gently from the kitchen sink as he washed the last soup pot. "That part is definitely true." The conversation drifted naturally from school projects to favorite books, from autumn leaves to the coming Thanksgiving holiday. For the first time in years, Claire spoke without thinking about stock prices, quarterly reports, or media headlines. She simply listened. She listened to Lily describe her dream of becoming an architect because she wanted to build houses where every child would have a bedroom with a window facing the sunrise. She listened to Ethan encourage every impossible dream as though nothing in the world mattered more. When it was finally time to leave, Claire paused beside the front porch steps. The cool evening breeze carried the scent of fallen maple leaves across the quiet neighborhood. She looked at Ethan with gentle determination. "Would you consider meeting me tomorrow morning?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. For what reason? Business, she answered honestly, but not the kind you are expecting. The following morning, Ethan arrived at Kensington Dynamics headquarters wearing his cleanest blue button-down shirt and neatly pressed jeans. He had no interest in impressing anyone. He simply believed respect began with how a person presented himself. Claire welcomed him in her office overlooking the Chicago skyline. Instead of sitting behind her large executive desk, she chose the smaller meeting table beside the window. "I would like to offer you a position," she said. "Not because I feel guilty, not because I owe you anything, because after reviewing your work and your history, I believe you are exactly the kind of person this company needs." She slid a folder across the table. Inside was an offer to become Director of Infrastructure Reliability, a position carrying a generous salary, full benefits, flexible hours, and educational support for Lily. Ethan studied the documents quietly before closing the folder. Claire waited without speaking. Finally, he looked up with the same calm expression she had come to admire. "It is an extraordinary offer," he said. "Then I hope you will accept." Ethan smiled warmly, but slowly shook his head. "I cannot." Claire blinked in surprise. "May I ask why?" He folded his hands together before answering. "Because I have spent years rebuilding a simple life after losing everything that truly mattered. My daughter finally knows where I will be every evening. She knows I will be at her school concerts, her science fairs, and our Thursday dinners. I am grateful for your confidence, but I cannot trade those moments for another title." Claire felt an unexpected lump rise in her throat. Most people she met wanted more money, more influence, or a faster climb toward success. Ethan wanted something far rarer. He wanted enough. As he stood to leave, Claire quietly realized she no longer admired him because he had forgiven her. She admired him because he understood a truth that billions of dollars had never been able to teach her. The richest life is not built by collecting more. It is built by refusing to lose what matters most. Winter arrived quietly that year, dusting the rooftops of Ethan's neighborhood with a light blanket of snow while the city hurried toward another holiday season. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm neither Ethan nor Lily had expected only a few months earlier. Claire never mentioned the executive position again. Instead, she began showing up in simpler ways. Some Thursdays, she joined them for grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Some Saturdays, she helped Lily build bird feeders in the backyard or bundled up to walk through the neighborhood Christmas market where children laughed beneath strings of warm white lights. She never tried to replace the life Ethan had carefully built. She simply became a gentle part of it. Weeks turned into months, and something remarkable happened. The distance between their two worlds slowly disappeared. Not because Ethan became wealthy or because Claire abandoned her responsibilities, but because both discovered that respect grows best when neither person asks the other to become someone different. Claire continued leading Kensington Dynamics with wisdom and integrity, yet she found herself leaving the office earlier whenever possible. Board members noticed she smiled more often. Employees noticed she listened more carefully. The company launched a new community repair initiative that quietly funded electrical safety upgrades for low-income families. But Claire never attached her own name to the program. She insisted the work should matter more than the recognition. Ethan volunteered many weekends teaching young apprentices the value of honest craftsmanship. His words were always the same. "People may forget what you repaired, but they will remember how you treated them." Lily, now healthier and full of confidence, loved introducing Claire to her teachers and friends without any concern for titles or headlines. One afternoon, while they decorated cookies together for the school holiday fundraiser, Lily looked up with the innocent certainty only children possess. "Miss Claire," she asked softly, "do you think families can grow even after they are broken?" Claire paused before answering. She reached across the table and gently held Lily's small hand. "I believe the strongest families are often the ones that choose each other every single day." Lily smiled, satisfied with the answer, then returned to covering a snowman cookie with far too many blue sprinkles. Ethan quietly watched the exchange from across the kitchen, his heart unexpectedly lighter than it had been in years. On Christmas Eve, snowflakes drifted gently beneath the porch light as the three of them stood outside Ethan's modest home after hanging the final string of lights along the roofline. The neighborhood glowed with warmth, laughter, and the comforting sound of distant church bells. Claire turned toward Ethan, her eyes reflecting the soft golden lights above them. "You once told me that electricity does not care about misunderstandings," she said with a gentle smile. "I think people do. But sometimes grace is stronger than misunderstanding." Ethan looked toward Lily, who was carefully placing a small star on top of the porch Christmas tree, before meeting Claire's eyes again. Grace gave all of us a second chance. Neither of them rushed the moment. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic promises, and no fairy tale declarations. There was only quiet understanding, steady respect, and the peaceful certainty that some of life's greatest miracles begin with ordinary kindness. Long after the snow had covered their footprints and another year quietly faded into memory, people who knew their story often believed the greatest blessing had been finding unexpected love. But they were only partly right. The real miracle was that one humble father never allowed embarrassment to steal his dignity. One successful woman found the courage to choose truth over pride, and one little girl discovered that the richest home is never measured by the size of its walls, but by the goodness of the hearts waiting inside.